And listen, ain't nothing wrong with being on the spectrum as we talked about. Because for those of you that don't know, I've never said this on the podcast before, but why the heck not? You know who else has autism? This guy right here. You want to know why I know so much stuff about the NYPD and why my memory is a mind trap? Because I got Asperger's, baby, and I can tell you this: I've learned, and I'm sure your son has done the same thing, to use it as an asset. It's not an albatross. It's only an albatross if you think about it. Like an albatross. So listen, much like him, I'm autistic and I'm darn proud of it, baby.
I commend you.
Yep. You learn to live with it as each day goes by. And listen, some of you guys probably could have already told by our interactions, but if not, hey, there you have it. First, the most uplifting job that you, Jerry Kazlauskas, ever responded to in either housing or the NYPD.
Uplifting job. It's going to sound weird, but I'm an animal lover. I like dogs, especially.
That makes two of us.
Yeah, and we were doing, myself and Dan Donnelly, Clinton was in when he was president, and it was a job up in Upper Manhattan, and it was a dog that fell between two buildings, and the buildings were shaped like a V. So the woman took the dog up to walk on the roofs, and he went down, he was stuck there. And on the way back to the truck, hey, let's go over there. It sounds like a pretty active job. And we got over there, and Joe Ocasio, and trying to think who else went over. Regina McGee, they went over the side.
Heard her.
Juan Garcia said, "You guys going over? Go." And we're trying to get this dog out. Meanwhile, they sedate the dog. Long story short, I'm up on the roof and they have the rope around the dog and I'm yanking. I'm trying to yank him. Dog's not budging. I said, wait a minute. They said, send one of the cops down to the bodega and get a gallon of oil. So they go down and get a gallon of oil poured on the dog. Working the dog. Dog finally comes out. I felt great. We saved the dog.
They matter just as much as humans do.
Yeah. I had good feelings, and being around when a baby's born or something, or doing CPR on somebody, which that happened in Manhattan when I was with Joe Ocasio on 2 truck. Guy had a cardiac at the boathouse. We went down, we're working on the guy, and finally I do CPR, and we step back, and then you see his neck pumping. We brought him back. Yeah, there was a few, but that was 2 of them.
And I'm sure in those moments, that's what made you say, man, I am really glad I took this job.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
For as many days that can make you on the NYPD and by extension, the FDNY, go home with this sad look on your face, there's just as many days that can make you go home with a smile. And there are 2 instances right there. So love that. Thank you. Dispatcher flowchart.
Okay. This shows you how information is received and processed in a dispatcher's office. Okay. Calls come in from 911, ERS boxes. They come in from private fire alarm companies such as like ADT, Rapid Response, USA Central, and companies like that. They all go into the alarm receipt dispatcher. And the alarm receipt dispatcher talks to the caller, verifies all the information, and also filters out a lot of the stuff. Firefighters don't go up and pull cats out of trees. And we told people, listen, we're not sending a fire company out for that. If you want to go knock on the firehouse door, okay, fine. And, they start getting really, like belligerent and stuff. Like, all right, listen, take a can of cat food, or tuna, put it at the bottom of the tree. The cat will eventually come down. So it goes from the alarm receipt dispatchers there, ARD, to the decision dispatcher. The decision dispatcher looks at the alarm, makes sure the right amount of units are going, the right type of units are going, and they send it out. And from there, it goes to the firehouses. Tone alert goes off in the firehouse, ticket prints up on the computer. Now, in the event that doesn't happen, it goes to the voice alarm. And the voice alarm is an intercom system between us and the firehouses. You can pick one specific firehouse, a group of firehouses, or just hit a button and you get the whole borough, and you would make the announcement. I'll give you an example, like, attention engine 4-3, ladder 5-9, respond, phone alarm box 4723, 20 Richmond Plaza, Sedgwick Avenue on 176th Street for a CO detector activation, apartment 14 Eddy. 43 and 59 acknowledge. 4359 10-4. That's a telephone alarm. It's a 5-7 signal. The box is 4723, 20 Richmond Plaza, Sedgwick and 176 for a CO detector. Your timeout is 2015. After, I think it's 90 seconds, it goes to the radio for announcement. So telephone alarm, the box is 3538, reporting the address 183 West 238th Street off of Bailey Avenue, reported to be a fire on the second floor. It's telephone alarm, the box is 3538, 183 West 238th Street. So off of Bailey Avenue, reported to be a fire on the second floor. Units going into box 3538, there is SIDS information available upon request. SIDS information is critical information dispatch system. We have a database in the computer that tells us if there's things that firefighters have to look out for when it comes to fighting a fire in that particular building. You know, you'll have a height of the building, the dimensions of the building, if it's what they call an H-type building, or if it's an old law tenement type of building, or even if it's just, you know, a 2-story frame construction building, you know, 20 wide by 40 deep, your typical New York City private house. And there'll be information on that building, you know, things like, you know, pit bulls in the backyard, heavy clutter condition in the basement, vacant building, holes throughout, exterior operations only. So if there's something on that building the firefighters need to know, they'll ask, you know, engine, we'll just use that particular box. It's 81 engine 46 truck first due. You know, engine 81, hey, could you give us the SIDS information for that building? 10-4, stand by. You'd pull it up and you'd read out the SIDS to the units responding. And sometimes you would have a situation. We had a situation in Manhattan one night. It was like a 6-story vacant. It was going up on like 139th Street and like 8th Avenue. Units pull up, transmit to 1075, and there's scaffolding in front of the building. So they can't see the fluorescent paint square with the X on it that shows a vacant building. And they can't see the address either. So one of the addresses the callers gave was such and such an address on 8th Avenue. So the dispatcher says to the battalion, hey, listen, I got SIDS on a building. I don't know if this is where you're operating, but I'm going to read out these SIDS. And write out the SIDS, you know, 6-story vacant, holes throughout, exterior operations only. All right, 10-4 Manhattan, we're pulling everybody out. Within like 2 minutes of them pulling out, you know, 20 guys out of the building, whole freaking building came down. Pancake collapse. Ended up going to a third alarm.
Briefly, Mike, you know, the flashback of the attack in Brooklyn on 4th Avenue and 38th Street, you know, recently, you know, if the case was in the back of my head, it's certainly in the forefront of it now. And, you know, I still think that, you know, the transit system is vulnerable. And I'm not trying to create fear, but I mean, I would hope that the city and the transit authority is putting more resources into doing things like checking and having better cameras. And, you know, it's always the thing where things happen and they say, oh, you know, the cameras aren't working. You know, why aren't they working? You know, I mean, what kind of maintenance is going on? I think it's important. I think they need to increase the members of the NYPD that are on the trains. You know, we talked about how it's the lifeblood, and you know, I'm glad to say, you know, that now, of course, because the jobs are combined, you know, there is no transit police and housing police. There's only, you know, the one police department. I think probably things like this would be done a little bit more efficiently now that we're all under one banner and one team. Because I mean, you know, they're you know, the reality, Mike, is there is a lot of fiefdoms and there's a lot of, you know, in-house fighting with these things. And, you know, like most good detectives, you know, we're a bit pushy and we're a bit ego-wise, and you know, it doesn't really help get it done sometimes. So. I'm glad he's still in jail. I hope he spends every single day of his sentence in jail. I hate to see him die early. I want him to spend every minute in jail because the people that he hurt, you know, are probably still suffering from the burns and the trauma of what they went through. So, you know, I hope he enjoys his stay in the state.
Dan?
Well, as always, I'm always impressed with the investigative abilities of our arson and explosion squad. They, Billy says, we push. Yeah, they do. And they come to the truth a lot faster than any other unit I've ever worked with. And that's really the definition of an investigation. Find out the truth,
Yeah.
And they do a great job at it.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. You guys do an amazing job as well.
Yeah, well, thank you. As I move further and further away from retirement and I watch other agencies, I just marvel about how quickly we're able to do our jobs and how well we did them when we had to do them, and I have a great regard for the detective division and a lot of units in there. The other thing I want to say is in preparation for this podcast, I read the Daily News article by Al Baker. So Al Baker and a team of almost 15 reporters from the Daily News descended upon this crime scene, and they were able to publish a 16-page spread on this particular incident. And you know what we're missing today? We're missing them investigative reporters, because they also help with these investigations. And if I could bring up one book, you talked about the first World Trade Center bombing. A reporter by the name of Jim Dwyer, along with Deidre Murphy and a couple of other reporters from New York, wrote a book called 2 Seconds Under the World. Terror Comes to America, the Conspiracy Behind the World Trade Center Bombing. That book came out in August of 1997. Having worked the first World Trade Center bombing, I did not know about the entire investigation that the FBI was running until I read Dwyer's book. So, my hat's off to a lot of great investigators and investigative reporters who actually go out there and do the job and tell our story.
Yeah, that's a very informative book. I've got it here somewhere, but
I need to get it. I need to read it.
Yeah,
great book. But again, and you know what? I miss the newspapers. I miss guys like John Miller going out there and asking questions that we might have missed, and working with us. Because I think we're all one big team. I hope that we're all working on the same side.
Being a new guy, I was fortunate. I had guys like Joe Patowski, another guy. He helped me immensely. So I was able to sort of get better at it. Traditionally, the sergeants in the bomb squad, we sort of run interference. So the guys will always tease us. They'll say, we do all the real work. And in essence, they do. But there wasn't a sergeant there who had a problem with suiting up, if need be. But you never stepped on the guys,
Right.
They wanted to be there. They wanted to be in that suit as much as I wanted to do it. Every once in a while, I remember Tommy Sullivan, another great guy. He'd say, okay, go in the suit. That was for me. That was so I could get better, at it. See, the more you do these things, no matter what they are, like I used to tell some emergency guys would sometimes tell me, hey, Tone, I'm sorry we called you for this. I go, why are you sorry? I said, every time we respond, right? We respond like it's game day. You're doing it, we're doing it. Because one day they're going to open that box and it ain't going to be good. I said, so, the more we do it, the more bomb techs get into a suit, the better they are in a suit. The more they deal with, sometimes they can't always be in a suit. That's a decision that they have to make. And one thing about, since I traveled around to bomb squads like Paulie's doing now, he'll tell you, they didn't even talk years ago about the hand entry. Only the NYPD did hand entry. And people just say, well, why do you guys have to do that? I said, because you can't get a robot 14 stories up when the elevator ain't working. You know what I mean? They got to do things. And sometimes you're in a crowd. I think I remember, St. Patrick's Day. I think it was me, Paulie, Ray. And we had to clear packages on the street, and like Paulie just went to work. There was no getting a bomb suit on. You throw a bomb suit on, and you got 10,000 people there. We basically evaluated it. We did what we had to do, and and you make it work. And like I say, there's no guarantee in anything that a bomb technician does. There's just no guarantee. But thankfully, most of the time, it's nothing. Thankfully.
18 years. Even though I'm sure you would have rather left on happier terms, and maybe you would have liked to have gone longer, at least 20, maybe even 25. When you look back, there's a lot to be proud of. I mean, there are some people that never get the chance to do the job at all. They end up on the waiting list. They never get on. Things happen. Circumstances happen. So do you at least look back at those 18 years and say, wow, I got to do the job. And not only did I get to do the job, look at the units you worked in. Rescue and Transit, ESU and the NYPD. It's a lot to be proud of, Joe.
It is, and frankly speaking, I would have stood there until what was it, 61?
63.
I would have stood there till 63. Oh yeah, no doubt about it. I would have stood there to the very end. The thing with my early dismissal from the job wasn't my doing. The department surgeon said to me, I'm putting you out. And I thought I made that decision. He goes, you're not. I'm making it. I'm putting you out. I go, I don't want to go out. And we're going back and forth. I didn't want to leave. Okay. I'm sure like every E-man, they enjoy their job. They take pride in what they do. And rightfully so. I did not want to leave. I even called the PBA. I called the union. And they said, no, he's putting you out, blah, 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 blah. And then comes after a while, you come to your senses, okay, but I would have been there to the very end, to the age where you had to leave. I would have been there, no doubt. If you ask me, would I be able to go back tomorrow? Would I do it? Yes, without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, we're older now. But oh yeah, I have no second thoughts. Yeah, you take pride in what you do, and every E-man takes pride in what they've done, and I'm sure of that. And it's something that it's just not a 9-to-5 job. Okay, you've come across just about every walk and talk of people on this earth, and you've helped people along the ways, and that's what makes an officer, whether you're ESU or patrol. You have attained so much stuff. It's unbelievable, It's unbelievable. But I'm sure everybody, regardless of their position in the NYPD or any law enforcement, people take pride in what they do. Regardless of what's going on out there, guys do the job because that's what they love to do. And I'm sure anyone who did law enforcement, minus today, but I'm sure the guys are very proud of what they've done in the past.
We're at the hour mark, and I know I said I wouldn't keep you too long. You mentioned being an instructor. You're also a writer. You've written 3 books. You've written in the FDNY Training Magazine. You've written in WNYF. So tell me how that came about, because it's one thing to verbalize thoughts on the fire service and transmit them to those that are under you, but it's another thing to write them down. And I remember having this conversation with Paul last year. It's almost harder because, as he joked, you want to make sure you put it in English. So tell me about writing.
And you know what? To some degree, it is harder. But what's easier is you can write and rewrite and edit and look at it and modify it, and then somebody else can look at it and help you with it. When you talk, you talk. It comes out of your mouth. Sometimes, like a lot of politicians learn the hard way. Sometimes it's hard to take the words back after you say them. But I started writing. Harvey Eisner, God rest his soul, from Firehouse Magazine. He used to write in Rescue 3 when I was a young firefighter there, and eventually he said, hey, why don't you write an article? I'm like, me? He said, yeah, write an article for the magazine. Make a long story short, eventually he sort of talked me into it. I wrote something basic about something I knew, something with the saw. And that led to another article, and I sort of started doing it maybe a couple of times a year. I don't remember the frequency. Eventually I got promoted to lieutenant, and I kept doing that, kept writing articles for him. And then he invited me to go to the Firehouse Expo in Baltimore, which was the show back in the old days of the slides, the little cardboard slides that you had actually put into the round projector and all that. And one thing led to another, you know. Eventually I thought, gee, a book would be interesting. And my first book came via Vinnie Dunn. It was after 9/11. It was 2002. It was published in 2003. A printer went to Vinnie Dunn and said, listen, there's a lot of leadership books out there. Leadership by Robert E. Lee, leadership by Abraham Lincoln, leadership by the Marine Corps. How about a fire service? How about a fire chief's leadership book? And Vinnie Dunn told me, you know what? I'm working on another book right now. I got a lot of books. And he gave them my name. And they came to me and said, would you like to do that? And I did. So that was my first book back in 2003, which is actually still in print. First in, last out, Leadership Lessons from the New York Fire Department. Still one of my most favorite. I enjoy the book. I still like it, and it's one of my most popular books. And then after that, it sort of bit me. I said, oh, that was good. And then I always wanted to write an engine book. After I was the captain of 48, you know, go look at all the books that are written. A lot are written about technical rescue and roof operations and truck guys and mustaches and Halligan tools and all the truck stuff. And there's not many engine books written. I said, I want to write an engine book. And I did. And I wrote The Engine Company, which I was happy with the results of that. Then my friend, Rick Lasky, a good friend of mine, I travel around and teach with him a lot. He's a retired chief from down in Texas. We wrote a leadership book together. My third book, 5-Alarm Leadership, which we both added our 2 cents into it and came out with a nice book. And actually, I just wrote another book, and it just came out. I just put it on Facebook the other day. It's called The Fire Scene, and it will be published and available December 20th through Fire Engineering Books. And that is really just an accumulation, a collection of my articles. I write the back page of Firehouse now every month. I've been doing it for almost 20 years. And I took the best and the brightest articles, and I categorized them by topic, and I made, I think, 13 or 14 chapters, and that's the new book. So it gets easier. Like being an officer, it gets easier the more you do it,
and
right?
The fifth and final question. I mean, listen, you had a very diverse career, 21 years. You started out in housing. I'm pretty sure if the Mark Mulitz of now could tell the Mark Mulitz in 1985, this is what your career would be, you know, that the Mulitz of 85 would be like. So with that said, what advice would you give anybody coming on the job now?
Mike, I go to supermarkets. I go wherever I am, and there's a kid there, and I'm like, hey, you know, I'll always stop and say, hey, you know, what's the story? What do you got? You know, oh, I'm in college. I'm doing this. I'm like, sign up for the cop test, and be like, nah, I don't want to do that. By the time I'm done with them, I got them at least thinking about it. You know, whether it's the city job or Suffolk or Nassau, because kids come to me, and my daughter's friends come to me and they say, oh, I took the city test, and, you know, I'm in the process. And I'm like, great. And they're like, well, people tell me I shouldn't do it. And I'm like, why? Why would people tell them? I just had a good friend of mine. His daughter just got on a job. She just got out of the last class. So she wanted to go to the 115. They're kind of doing training like they did when I came on, more like an in a shoe type of thing. You know what I mean? Where they go to the 115, but they'll cover a couple of different precincts. So I said, Mike, listen, give your daughter, you know, my number and tell her to text me. And she was going through that whole thing. She was going through telling me, you know, people are telling me all the time, why am I doing this? The worst job in the world. And I'm like, this is the best job in the world. Do not listen to these people. You know, I just saw Mike, and he says she's so happy. She loves it. You know, I would never, ever, ever tell any of these kids not to take this job.
There's always the growing pains of a new unit, and you kind of touched on it now. 84, 85, 86, you're trying to get off the ground and trying to make people understand it in the city, not just residents, but obviously the higher-ups in the fire department, those at City Hall as well. This is why we're here. This is why you need us. It's tough, but it's a beautiful thing when you look back in hindsight and you see, well, just that, the infancy stages and what you had to do and the fact that you were doing more with less. So when you look back on those first 2 years, what were the biggest challenges, but what were the biggest rewards?
Well, there were a lot of challenges internally within the house. We were put into a house with it was designed as a double house, but only had a single engine. So we were taking over a lot of their space. So we really had to work with them to get them to accept us and understand what we were trying to deal with. And we had to understand what they were now accepting, all of these, 39 other people coming into the house and taking over most of their space. you had to work out the small issues in the firehouse, like commissary and cooking and cleaning issues with all of that. But we were also doing a lot of training, so we weren't always there. The engine was really great. They picked up a lot of slack for us. We were out all the time. In fact, one of the things we tried to do in the beginning was everybody was going to put $1 in a pool every time you worked. And the first crew that went to all 5 boroughs in one 24-hour shift would get the pool. Nobody ever won, but we were dealing a lot with new equipment. We, of course, had some basic equipment from the second piece that came to hazmat from Rescue 4. Rescue 4, of course, was doing the first hazmat response from about 80 to 84, 81 to 84, after the incident with the LPG tanker on the George Washington Bridge, which started the whole process up. But we needed a lot more equipment. So what we really did, and I'll give credit to Captain Gallagher, the first captain, and the 3 officers we had. We had Joe Jordan, whose son is a staff chief now. We had John Calderon, who retired out of battalion, probably one of the longest serving battalion chiefs that I'm aware of in the job, and Joe Buell, both of them coming out of Rescue 4. But they took each of the members of the company and assigned us something. Phil McGardle was in charge of looking for schools to attend. Somebody was looking at level A ensembles. I was looking at level B ensembles. John Norman was there. He had a background in knowledge in plumbing, so he was looking at all of the equipment that we needed on the apparatus. We had Chris Waters there from Rescue 3, Noel. He was a chemistry teacher, and later on became the chair of the chemistry training program down at the National Fire Academy. He helped with a lot of the training and setup for us. And we had a tremendous amount of people in that first group. There were 60 volunteers to sign up to try to get into the company, and they picked 35. You know, one of the guys, Billy Bulkeman, was a pesticide applicator out on the island. So we had a wide variety of talented people there. Vinnie Doherty had a degree in chemistry. Kevin Cully had a degree in chemistry. So we were able to portion out the workload to really try and get up to speed with some of the few other hazmat companies around the country. Jacksonville, Florida was one of the first ones, if not the first one. Houston was up there too. We had a lot of catching up to do, and the team pulled together quite well, but it was challenging. We also had issues at the top, getting the chiefs to understand this is not a fast process. And I still say it to this day. I don't know of any hazmat team that's ever saved somebody. Life safety is done by first due companies. We're going in to try and mitigate the material from affecting other people, to try and contain it, neutralize it, put it someplace else. And it's a slow process. And because there's no life safety usually involved except our own, it should be a slow process. Taking the time to think about what the issues are, to sometimes taking samples and moving them around and testing them in the street before you can take an action. I can remember one of those we had in Brooklyn. A man had a contract company. He was a salvager that would purchase the contents of buildings that had where the business had gone out of business. And he had a new contract that he needed to have some empty drums to go and collect the stuff out of the new building. And he had a drum in the back of it was a 5-bay garage that he owned behind a row of homes in Brooklyn. And we accessed it through an 8-foot wide alley. He had a drum of bags of sodium chips, metallic sodium chips. And he took the bags out and was throwing them on the ground so he could use the drum. One of the bags broke open and ignited with the moisture on the ground, the dew. It's very reactive with water, moisture. And he tried putting it out with a garden hose. It got a little bigger. So he stopped putting water on it, started spitting back at him. It's like even probably more reactive than magnesium when we deal with magnesium fires on vehicles. And first 2 units came and they saw fire. So they took out a hand line and put water on it, and it got worse. And then they decided to smother it with some sand. So we got there and we took some samples, and Kevin Cully was one of the ones, chemistry degree, played with it in the street, and we determined it was metallic sodium. So we had to overpack it in a drum. The 2 of us went in, and we put in some absorbent, oil dry, then a bag, another layer of oil dry, a bag, another layer. We got to the last 2 bags and we ran out of oil dry. So we figured we would use the sand from the same pile that the first 2 units had used to smother the fire. Except now we were digging deeper into the pile of sand, and we've got some wet sand and put it on the second to last bag. Before we could lift up the last bag to put it in, the thing pretty much exploded out of the can. It reacted that violently with the wet sand. And we had a lot of learning lessons like that in the early days, a lot of challenges.
So you got a lot of examples that you've seen, not even from somebody that had a rank, maybe just a senior guy or gal that was a great example that you wanted to follow, and maybe somebody, if they told you something, they went in one ear and, of course, out the other. So how did that mold you as a new sergeant?
You kind of take the best you can and get rid of the worst as you can, but you kind of have to look at yourself. Like, the first thing you should do, and I'll say this, I know I didn't do that, is look at yourself. Like, maybe I'm the bad guy in this situation. Maybe I'm the supervisor that needs to change. It's easy to say the things you did right. It's hard to admit what you did wrong. As I reflect on my career, I definitely learned more from the things I did wrong. So if another supervisor was looking at me and saying, "Hey, I wouldn't do what Steve did," then good. I'm glad you learned from that, from my example. One of the better examples I can describe of myself not being the best supervisor was I had this mentality that rookies should always be graded low so that we can get rid of them at any time. That was a horrible idea. It really disincentivized good guys from working harder. And I look back on that. That was a dumb thing to do. As I reflect, I'm like, I wish I hadn't done that. I grabbed that nugget of information from somebody else thinking it was a good idea, but it was a terrible idea. So everything you kind of have to parse, good and bad, may kind of be a continuum. You can't just say something's good or bad. You have to see how your decision affects other people. Specifically in terms of bad decisions, again, myself, there was a barricade. Well, there was a job in the 7-1, and it was a dispute behind a door, kind of shady apartment, shady building. The 911 caller said that there was somebody behind the door with a knife. So I'm thinking, wow, it's a barricaded perp. Let's get ESU here. I think it was my very first line of patrol. Let's get ESU here. Let's boom the door. Let's get in there. And I remember the ESU, I forget the guy's name, but I remember the ESU guy. Once he kind of gets some information about what's going on in the apartment, he actually says to me, he goes, "Man, I wish I wasn't the sergeant on this job." What ended up happening was there was a woman in a wheelchair with a butter knife in a crack house, was basically kind of waving the butter knife around. And that was the woman with the knife holding people hostage. So we get in there and she's in a wheelchair and it's a disaster. And again, I compound my bad decision by arresting her in the wheelchair for menacing with a butter knife. So we have to bring the wheelchair downstairs and put the wheelchair in the van. So again, one of those times when if I had just taken a step back and I was copying somebody else who I thought, oh, he did a good job. Jimmy called for ESU for barricaded perp. Let me do that. Terrible idea. So good and bad is not, I don't want to say it's meaningless, but it's almost like when you're that young on the job, you don't know what is good or what is bad. And it's almost like a trial by fire or by having an ESU guy saying, man, I wish I wasn't you. And at that moment, I wish I wasn't me either.
That's true, but at least you're able to, and I appreciate that. That's the highlight of the show right there. When I put out the highlight clips the day after the show, that's the one I'm going to use.
Each book is different. The difficulty with the book Anytime, Anywhere was I modeled the whole notion on the book Homicide: Life in the Street.
Love the book.
And to spend a year. And I wanted to do it with one squad. And as it so happens, I was Harlem at the time, Washington Heights, Manhattan North was really interesting. And the guys in the squad were really amazing. But there's a difference between detective work, where a case is, and a case can last 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, and incidents. And ESU is more incident driven. It is incident driven jobs. catching it on the frequency, rolling out, depending on what assets need to be deployed. So I wanted to pick up different aspects of the work. But going back to the craft, if I was to do it now, and I'm hopefully a little smarter and a little better at what I do, I would have focused a lot more on the talk inside the cabin of the REP and at the table at quarters, where people reflected on the city, and as opposed to the more tactical and exciting elements of the job that were, to me, were absolutely spellbinding. But to get a better sense of who these guys were, what they did, and the talents that they had.
Yeah.
And I always found with these individuals in particular, of all, and I've covered units around the world, I found that the guys who were in ESU were incredibly gifted in terms of skills, in terms of dedication, and in terms of their ability to laugh at crisis and pain and sorrow. And I thought that of all the people that I've dealt with, intelligence units, specialized counterterrorist units, anywhere in the world, the guys in ESU are the most humane and the most human of them all.
That leadership has to understand, especially in emergency services, okay? A lot of those sergeants and lieutenants that you've been talking about, they're E-men. Those guys, they understand. The problem that you see in today's day and age, unfortunately, is you can't just put a boss into a unit like emergency services. You have to be a cop there first. You have to understand what it is we do. You also have to understand, if you're the entry-level boss, as I call it, a sergeant, you have to understand that on any given night, you could be my partner. And I'm not talking to you like a sergeant. I respect your rank, but I'm talking to you as my partner because we may be truck only and we're running around. So if we have to do some grunt work, I'm a sergeant, I'm not lifting that ladder. No, it doesn't work that way. That's not what ESU is about. And those guys that you're talking about, okay, like Billy Kennedy is one, he's the first guy to pick up the ladder, because that's who he is. That's an E-man there. And that's what, in order for our unit to succeed, you have to constantly pound that into people's heads. We respect rank. All cops respect the rank in ESU. But there's a camaraderie. We are one. That's who we are. Doesn't matter if you're a sergeant, lieutenant, who you are, we are one. And if we operate as a one, we're going to get the mission accomplished.
Well, let me pause it because that's around the point when the shots started ringing off. And I'll let you take it from there. What happened the rest of the way here?
We respond. We're actually on the street facing one way and talking to another sector car. And somebody comes over in their vehicle and says, there's something going on in Entenmann's. We don't know what it is. It looks bad, though. People are running out of stuff. So we spin around. We go to Entenmann's. And as we get there, we're in a blue and white. You can see people spot us and they come running out of the place. So we know something's bad in there right away. And the doors are like a gloss black. You can't see what's going on. And I wasn't going to just run up to the door with my partner. We opened the doors and we took aim and we sat tight for a minute. And other cars are coming. Long story short, the two idiots in the store that were doing the robbery with the guns ran out the back. And that's where you hear the guy saying, the guy in the male uniform says they're running out the back. The guy in the male uniform was actually a security guard saying they ran out the back. So I zipped down the back. My partner was already out running. So we had split up. And I used to tell him all the time, he was kind of mad at me because we split up. I said, you're lucky you didn't sit in the car with me because afterwards, if you looked at the car that I was in, it was like Swiss cheese. And the headrest and the seat and the windshield in my car was all torn up with bullets. And so we spin around the corner, and they had taken a woman and a grandkid out of a blue Honda and knocked them to the ground and took that car and took off because that car was in front of the building stolen. They couldn't get to that car because we were there. So around the corner, some more shots exchanged. He fired some shots at me. My two partners in the back from anti-crime fired and blew out the windshield, but I took a nice little graze on my finger, my scalp, and my forehead. And a pursuit took off. I was behind him the whole way with a car behind me calling it over because I was going too fast. I couldn't talk on the radio. And it went through the 6-7, the 7-1, the 7-7. and finally crashing at 95 and Clarkson, and the guys were shot up pretty bad, and aviation was there. If you listen long enough, you'll hear aviation in the thing. You can hear them. You can hear the helicopter hovering around up there. It was just a melee. 15 of us got medals that day. It was out of control. Those guys were deported after 12 years back to Jamaica.
And towards the tail end, you got to be a negotiator yourself, because as you were telling me, and I found this interesting, you had spent so much time teaching it. And as you just finished saying, having a great time teaching it, that you didn't have to get the chance to actually do it yourself for a while. But now, even though there's time on, you had this very youthful, and you still do, I can see it tonight on the podcast, you're carrying the show, my friend, and I appreciate that, because like I said before, I'm not feeling the best tonight. You had this youthful, vivacious energy that really helped you through. And you finally got to implement that, not in a training scenario, not in an ESU H&T school, the real thing on the street, as you did when you were a housing cop.
I had over 30 years on the job, and I couldn't leave the job, but I couldn't stay where I was. And nobody could get their head around that. I'd go into a classroom of in-service cops, and I'd introduce myself, and I'd say I have 30 years on the job. And the cops would be like, why? You're losing money. And they verbally attacked me for staying. And I'd say to them, relax. This isn't about me. This is about you. See, my work was taking the lamp off of me and putting it on them. The experts were in the audience. All of us are better than any of us. And I'd say, forget about me. What are you doing? Are you retiring? This? Oh, absolutely. This is it. I'm done. Job sucks. I'm getting out of here. 20 and out. No more than 20. I said, okay. I appreciate that. I hear you. I understand that. All these verbal judo techniques. And I said, so when are you leaving? Are you leaving in January? I asked with an asking face. And then I get, I'm not leaving in January. I got 5 more years to do. To which I would say, I'm sorry to hear that, Captain. Okay. So what are we going to do? And you're going to win where you are. And so they pressured me to retire, which I didn't. And I asked Jack Cambria for help, and I leveraged a lot of political capital. And I did the unthinkable. I left the training bureau, as well as I was cared for there. I had a window seat in first class.
I'll say.
And I said, but I lack credibility. Okay, I'm an actor. I have to feel right about what I'm doing. I was at a state in my life where I had everything but the sense that I was doing what I was teaching, and that's something I couldn't reconcile. It took a while, and trust me, it was rebuffed, because I was told I was valuable, and I don't think I wasn't. But where are you going to put a guy with over 30 years on the job? You have to be a detective to be in a hostage negotiation team. That was my motivation. I went to missing persons. Where are they? The new PSA on 148th Street and 147th Street and 8th Avenue. What used to be Drew Hamilton houses is now a freestanding building, PSA 6, close to my home in Rockland. Christopher Zimmerman, Lieutenant Zimmerman, was the CO of the Missing Persons Squad. He was also a member of the hostage negotiation team. 30% of the membership of the Missing Persons Squad were also hostage negotiators. Because of where it was geographically, it was a perfect pivot to go to the South Bronx, to all of Manhattan, or even shoot out to Queens. It was the perfect place to be. And I was fortunate because I was able to persuade, and I can be persuasive, but I got a position as a detective investigator in the Missing Persons Squad of the Special Investigations Division of the Detective Bureau. That was tall. And I had to learn. I had a steep learning curve. I had to learn these missing persons cases were serious. Each one of these cases was a lit stick of dynamite. The last thing you wanted is that stick of dynamite to go off in your hand. So I was hitting those DD5s for hours every day, and I had to learn it. The good news is the men and women of the Missing Persons Squad, half of them were students of mine when they're in their earlier lives. They embraced me. Once again, we will love you until you can love yourself. They showed me how to do it. The bosses were on my side. And the deal was I would go out on every single hostage job. I had a partner. had a car of our own, and we would go out on every single job. We rocked and rolled every time. And I finally felt the merit of that transfer. And I was working shoulder to shoulder, side by side with the ESU cops who knew me again from training. So it really felt like it came full circle. I felt authentic. I felt connected. I felt genuine. And that's what I needed for my midlife crisis. And I got it. Be careful what you ask for. You might
Interesting gambit. 20 years, a lot to be proud of. Transit police, that was a lot of fun, especially at EMRU and the rescue unit. And obviously the last 6 years in emergency service. You know, what are you proudest of in your career?
Well, you know, again, I was very fortunate. I had a guardian angel probably looking over me. And you look back at some of the things you did, some of the risks that you took with, you know, your partners and whatnot, and some of the things that we did. And you say to yourself, wow, it wouldn't have taken much for that to go the wrong way. Right. So, you know, I look back at that, but one of the redeeming features of my life and my career have been my post 9/11 career has kept me busy and constantly working with and bumping into guys and gals. And when I say guys, I mean everybody. Working with and getting doing things with guys that have been retired, came through PD, emergency service, transit, whatever the case may be. And so many of the, in fact, Johnny Lampkin is one of the names. I think you've interviewed Kenny Winkler,
yep,
and so many others. Our paths have probably crossed as much now in retirement and working in our own areas than when we were probably on the job together. So what's great is you can go to a meeting, 100 people, and you can find the one guy or the one gal that you were on the job. Yeah, okay, blah, blah, blah. And you start reminiscing, and then you realize who they were. And so I find that's been, it's been a great part of a great success of my success of what I've been doing since I left the job. And it's worked out well for everybody. That there's that you know, quiet network out there. The guys are still involved in different things, different agencies, different businesses, and whether you're getting a phone call or a text, you know, do you know somebody that knows somebody who knows somebody? Yeah, I do. You know, or yeah, you know, you're doing the same thing to them. Hey, I need this or I need that. All right, give me a day, I'll get back to you. So it's a great network. It's a great brotherhood, sisterhood that we've had over the years. And it's great that we still have guys that are still on the job that, you know, keep the flame burning. And again, like I said earlier, the Retired Emergency Man's Association is again, I run into guys that retired before I came on the job. And that's like an amazing, you know, amazing longevity, you know, testament to that.
Of course. No, and I'm a member of REMA, and I'm very thankful for that. And I think I can say this now that we've hit volume 30 of this miniseries. And I know I've said this before, and I apologize if I sound like a broken record to the audience, but I appreciate you guys peeling back the curtain for me and allowing me a glimpse into, and all the guys from ESU, NYPD, from housing rescue, from transit rescue, you know, giving me a look inside, well, as you just said, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, because I get it, I'm an outsider. But you guys have welcomed me with open arms, and I really do appreciate that because I genuinely do love the history of the unit, well, the department as a whole, but especially that unit. And to have gotten to have chronicled so many of you guys over the last year or so and hear the different stories of the different trucks and the many amazing jobs you guys have had, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a real blessing. It's not really much more I could say to sum it up, but man, you know, I've seen that camaraderie, and it's a great thing to behold. You hit the nail on the head.
The cutting edge of the firestorm had moved to the Bronx, the North Bronx, where we had these big apartment houses, grand concourse, giant apartment houses, combustible interiors. So we were struggling, learning how to do those. We now know how to do those H-type fires. But anyway, so he said, no, thanks, but the borough commander is going to write a whole big thing. So now, okay, so at least I knew I could, you know, I just took stuff from all over and put it together. and I talked a little bit about my fire, but it was really like a study thing for me. So then I go on with my life, learning to be a deputy in the Bronx, and there's a lot of fire, many more fires than any place I worked. And so one day I relieved this veteran chief up there, and he said, yeah, we had a third alarm fire in Manhattan last night. We would respond to North Bronx and Manhattan. So he said, the parapet wall collapsed. As he's leaving the firehouse. That's all. One line, he tells the parapet wall collapsed. So we do all administration work that morning. So I said to the driver, let's take a ride over and look at Harry's fire. I go over to drive over to Manhattan to this fire. It was a row of stores. The parapet wall had collapsed into the street. There was 4 feet of stone for 100 feet on the sidewalk. I am shocked. I said, wait a minute. Call headquarters, get me the photo unit up here, give me a pad and pencil, and I'm going to start to draw this. I want the photo unit to photograph this wall that came down in a wave. You know, one part of it came down and it was all tied together with iron bar. It was a cast stone parapet wall with an overhang. Came down in a wave. So I wrote this article. I had to write this up. I write about parapet wall collapse. And in the article, you know, I'm now a deputy. Now I start to think about fire I had in 23rd Street where 12 guys got killed. Now I'm saying I got a responsibility here. I'm the deputy. So I got to make sure my firefighters don't get killed with collapse. Now that thing that was post-traumatic stress that had come out of me as a deputy, I never thought about that after I was at this fire where 12 firemen died. And 10 years, 11 years later, I'm a deputy. Now I'm thinking about this collapse. So now I see this parapet walls are recurrent collapse danger. I write this article. And as I write the article near the end, it's, well, who's responsible when guys get killed at a collapse? I said, who is responsible? I said, well, the incident commander, the deputy, the buck stops with him. He's the final responsibility. However, at a big fire, I assigned a sector chief, another chief officer, sector 2, sector 3, the rear, sector 4, the right side. And that sector chief is responsible for that sector, for lives of the firefighters working in that sector, in their sectors. And the company officer who's operating around this fire is responsible for the firefighters in his unit. And then the firefighters are responsible to listen to the company officer and follow his direction and not freelance. So I'm not saying the ultimate responsibility is the incident commander, but there's shared responsibility with sector officer, we call them division officer, sector chief. There's shared responsibility with company officers, and there's shared responsibility with firefighters. One man can't make a fire scene safe. One chief can't make that, but the team of sector chiefs, company officers, and firefighters doing what they're supposed to do. That's how safety comes about in the fire service.